What's up, everybody? Possibly everybody that has a channel has covered this already, but I was ignoring it at first. I kept hearing more and more. Then I heard somebody say that they detected structures 2 kilometers below the Earth. So I started looking into it, and I'll just show you guys what I'm looking at here. First, I'll give you the Daily Mail version, which is basically what everybody with a short video on this is reporting from, and I don't know if they looked into this very much. If this is true, then yeah, it's extraordinary, but I don't know. The whole internet might have just got played. You tell me. Researchers from Italy and Scotland claim to have uncovered a vast underground city which stretched more than 6,500 feet directly underneath the pyramids of Giza, making them 10 times larger than the pyramids themselves, which has spawned images like this that are now going around, and I'm getting a serious Tartaria flashback vibe. If you guys remember the old underground pictures of the cathedrals, you know what I'm talking about. The new radar technique works by combining satellite radar data with tiny vibrations from naturally occurring seismic movements to construct 3D images of what lies beneath the surface of the Earth, without doing any physical digging. Nicole Sicolo, the project spokesperson, said a vast underground city has been discovered beneath the pyramids. This groundbreaking study has redefined the boundaries of satellite data analysis and archaeological exploration. The cylinder-shaped structures, which Sicolo referred to as shafts, were arranged in 2 parallel rows and surrounded by descending spiral pathways. Sicolo said the cylinder structures were found underneath each of the 3 pyramids and appeared to serve as access points to this underground system. The existence of vast chambers beneath the Earth's surface, comparable in size to the pyramids themselves, which have a remarkably strong correlation between the legendary halls of Amenti, Sicolo added. So that's their spokesperson mentioning the halls of Amenti. We'll get back to that. These new archaeological findings could redefine our understanding of the sacred topography of ancient Egypt, providing spatial coordinates for previously unknown and unexplored subterranean structures, she added. The news has gone viral this week, with X flooded with posts about the potential discovery. Yes, it has. Even Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna shared a post about it. And then, I'm reading claims about this saying that these cylindrical structures stretching down over 600 meters, about 2,000 feet, straight down beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza. These massive findings, located more than 2 kilometers below the pyramid's base, hint at an enormous hidden construction. So is it 600 meters or is it 2 kilometers? Because that's not the same thing. Now, I guess they could mean that the cylinders are 600 feet and then those boxes below them are another 1.4 kilometers. They're also saying that there's another 5 chambers, I think they said, that were previously unknown inside of the pyramid. And then a whole nother horizontal ramp, and then whatever that stuff is down at the bottom. I guess those are supposed to be rooms. I don't know. So like I said, if this is true, this is pretty extraordinary. Supposedly those shafts are hollow, and then it's got a spiral walkway going all the way down. But the data that they're showing to back that up is this. So translating that into a hollow shaft with a spiral walkway going down is using a bit of artistic license, in my opinion. And I also want to point out that if these guys somehow have this technology that can see 2 kilometers down into the Earth, then they'd probably be a national security threat, because you can't have anybody peeking around what's under the White House or what's in Cheyenne Mountain or any of their big tunneling projects that they've got going. Now, I don't know. This could be 100% legit. I'm just voicing a little bit of doubt here. We'll get into the actual paper in a minute, but it sounds like they're just analyzing publicly available data, and they're somehow able to come to these conclusions where nobody else could. But to the left, you've got a drawing of the inside of the pyramid. In the middle, it's kind of mixed over their thermal imaging, for lack of a better word. It's SARS. But then on the right, with their imaging, I don't see how you're correlating that at all to the image on the left. And then here you've got kind of the same thing. It's just a green blob. But anyway, I'm just looking through the data that they've put forth here, and I'm a bit skeptical, especially when I got to this image. And Below the ground, below the pyramid, they are depicting that as a spring with a weight on it. Now, pretty much the only way that that would be applicable in this situation is if these columns were hanging off of the bottom of the pyramid and it was completely open all around that. That's the only way that that would actually be applicable here. And then diagram D is using time as one vector and energy as another. Huh? And then it's pointing towards the azimuth. And in another image here, you see these referred to as the azimuth view, I guess, on the bottom here. Azimuth. Well, the actual definition of azimuth is it's usually used in like an astronomical setting, but the azimuth is how far off either north or south an object is. So here you're about 45 degrees southeast, and then you have your elevation or inclination, whatever they call it in this case. But, you know, I don't know everything. I just know that this is one of the definitions of azimuth. It may have another meaning, but I couldn't find it. Now, back to the halls of Amenti that was referenced by their official spokesperson. Now, I've heard of this several times. You guys probably have too. But once again, to the best of my knowledge, this only comes from one source, and that's the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, a book that was published in the 1940s or 50s by Maurice Doreal. And he was an American occultist and founder of the Brotherhood of the White Temple. He claimed that in 1925, he visited the Great Pyramids of Giza. He discovered a set of ancient emerald tablets belonging to the Egyptian deity Thoth, whom he reimagined as a king of Atlantis. Doreal then claimed to have translated the text, which he published as the Emerald Tablets of Thoth the Atlantean, not to be confused with the Emerald Tablet. So he's kind of a reincarnation of Joseph Smith with his gold plates that he translated out of his hat. But hey, he was just a lucky guy. He went to the pyramids in 1925 and he found these tablets and walked away with them, apparently. Had time to go home and translate them. He was a theosophist. That's where the Brotherhood of the White Temple in Denver comes in. And in 1931 in Los Angeles, he met two Atlanteans who took him to a cave underneath Mount Shasta. Doreal quickly developed a cosmology focused on the inner earth, describing underground races he claimed to have learnt about from the Atlanteans. Doreal developed theories of an underground, believe it or not, I can't say that term here, let's say Homo serpentis or Homo lizardus. These people, believe it or not, they've got that keyed in here. He also believed that there were three types of flying saucers, including one piloted by the Homo lizardus, who were once icebound in Siberia, became defrosted, and then replaced and overthrew the comrades in Russia. Wow, I didn't realize that's what happened there. So look, I'm not dogging on the idea of underground civilizations. I think that might be one of the better explanations for UFOs. Even the Homo lizardus or Nagas are very well documented in Indian and Buddhist history. But it's extremely lucky that one guy made these two discoveries of a lifetime. And he's a theosophist that's all about this kind of stuff. But I've looked into this stuff before, and to the best of my knowledge, this is where we get the halls of Amenti from. It's really not even clear if this is a physical or spiritual place. So for the official spokesperson of this project to mention the halls of Amenti makes me think more YouTuber than any accredited scientist. No one affiliated with academia would ever mention the halls of Amenti. And if they know what they're doing and this is all legit, that's fine. I mean, I'd say academia would definitely try to discredit this, but I'm just letting you know that's one issue here. Now let's talk physical sciences here. Anywhere you dig down, you're going to hit the water table eventually. That's why people dig wells, even in the desert. So under the Giza Plateau, the water table is about 4 to 7 meters below the surface. So if this is true, then that is an amazing feat of engineering, because going 2 kilometers down, you're going to be pumping massive amounts of water out of the ground to be able to dig it, and then it's going to be a trick to keep it dry once you've dug it. Another consideration is that the pyramids are built on top of bedrock. Now, it's claimed in the paper that they went down, 600 meters, 2 kilometers to hit the bedrock, but it's typically known that it's about 30 to 50 feet down. So again, if true, that's an amazing feat of engineering to go 2 kilometers through bedrock. There's even a Bible verse about the man who built his house on stone and the guy who built it on sand. The builders of the pyramid knew they had to be on a solid foundation, which was actually the first thing I thought of when I heard this. I was like, well, wow, they went all out on some pylons, but if they're hollow inside, which how they interpret that from the data, I have no idea, but you wouldn't make the pylons hollow. So this is a really long paper that they wrote, and they've got all kinds of mathematical equations in here, and it looks all official. But I don't know how many people dug down to the conclusions at the end. But let's start right here. This is describing this figure right here, the strange one that caught my eye. Figure 8 illustrates the oscillating model in the Euclidean space-time coordinates, x, y, z, t, where the satellite motion has been purified from any orbital distortion so that the geometric parameters used to perform the tomographic focusing can be rigorously understood. That doesn't actually say anything. Figure 8C is the length of the spring when it's at its maximum tension, while LO is its length when no mass is present. So once again, unless these pillars are hanging off of the bottom of the pyramid, then this is just absurd. Now look, I'm no physicist, and if I'm wrong, I'll admit that I'm wrong, but I got a feeling when actual physicists review this paper, it's going to be a laughing stock. No, it hasn't been peer-reviewed at this time. Even how this came to be on the internet is a little bit fuzzy, because I've heard one story where it was leaked, and then another story where they held a press conference. But I've kind of illustrated many times that facts don't matter if the internet likes what it's hearing. So there's pages and pages of equations making it look all official. But now let's read their conclusions down here. The Giza Plateau had this characteristic, is due to the need to convey in an orderly manner the water that flowed along the faces of the pyramidal structures. Now, it's highly controversial whether the damage on the outside of the Sphinx and pyramids are water erosion, but they're just stating it as fact here. In the case of the Pyramid of Khufu, which we have analyzed in depth, it can be assumed in analogy with other authors that it was surrounded by an enormous basin full of water, which allowed the circulation of some boats. These boats were used by some attendants with the task of bringing water to about 90 meters high, pouring it into the south shaft by using many rotating stones, probably similar to the Sabo diorite. So they were using boats to pour water into a shaft. The SAR technique, I guess I should explain that. This is the title of the paper. Synthetic Aperture Radar Doppler Tomography reveals details of undiscovered high-resolution internal structures of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Once again, it sounds all fancy, but I'd hardly call this high resolution. But okay, this technique allows us to provide evidence that the shape of this monument does not resemble a perfect pyramidic form because of the presence of a double changing in slope, the first of which is approximately 20 meters high, while the second is at 100. The Nile River's water should have filled the basin up to the height of the first change of slope of the pyramid, thus allowing the Egyptian boats not to get stuck with the keel on the side of the pyramid itself. Okay, what boat? The boat that's filling the shaft up with water? I mean, if you got a boat floating on water, you don't need the boat to pour water down a shaft. The water is just going to flow down the shaft. But then we kind of have a different story here. The water would have invaded the king's chamber, but having reached the height of the granite basin inside the chamber, often referred to as a sarcophagus. See, YouTuber. This is another Christopher Dunn. It's an author or a YouTuber. Because here he's saying, oh no, there's no way that that granite box could be a sarcophagus. It would not have exceeded that level in height and would have instead risen in the north shaft, whose entrance is placed at the same height as the basin, creating an air sill that effectively airlocked the room. Once again, somebody claiming that you stack a bunch of stones on top of each other and it's airtight with no mortar. Even with mortar, it's not airtight, it's not watertight. Stone is porous and the air and the water will seep right through all of it. Having the king's chamber, in fact, hermetically sealed, would have caused excess water to rise up in the north shaft. The queen's chamber would also be filled with water up to the height of the shafts by means of two connections to the shafts of the king's chamber, which were probably located in blah, blah, blah. As also proposed by other authors, the pyramid with its megalithic structure was placed in vibration by the wind. and the low frequencies thus developed. So the wind blowing is vibrating the entire pyramid, which acted as a low-pass filter, allowing only low frequencies to bounce back on the roof of the Z towards the king's chamber. So before we go any further, let's do this, because I see people eat this up all the time. You throw in a couple of actual scientific principles, and people think you really know what you're talking about because they don't understand what you're saying. Let's look into the authors here. One is Filippo Biondi, and from what I can tell, it seems like this guy's legit. His profile picture is of the time travel machine, whatever it was in Doctor Who, which, okay, scientist, science geek, I get that. I mean, no disrespect by that. I'm a dumb science geek. Then the other author is Corrado Malanga. I don't speak Italian, but I'll do my best. Trilogy of Consciousness. Another book of his isn't too hard to figure out here. Aliens or Demons. And then Cheops, The Fabric of Immortality, something like that. And these are all classified in the category of non-ordinary. And then we've got UFO Nellamente. Now, I did translate Nellamente, UFO in the mind. Okay, so that's where all of this is coming from. A ufologist that, for the most part, is using a bunch of big words that don't mean anything, and then just combining a bunch of YouTube theories. But he showed a bunch of equations, some of which weren't applicable in this case whatsoever. And it's what the internet wanted to hear, so everybody has ran with it. So I don't know if any of these images are actually real or not. The method he described says that they're using the vibration inherent in the materials itself to be able to image this, and it's really sketchy. And then everything he's describing here is pure speculation, kind of like the pyramid chemical factory idea. You're using the features that are found in one specific pyramid that aren't the same in all of them, and then trying to make it fit into known scientific principles. But okay, the water reached the queen's chamber where the height of the water could not exceed the height of the shafts from the floor. A particular frequency would be developed, which was suitably amplified by the correct dimensions of the niche present in the west wall, which acted as a sound box for a musical instrument, releasing into the air a sound frequency that was able to interact with a cylindrical container placed on the floor of the room, the traces of which are still visible. This cylindrical container, probably made of wood, was put into resonance by the obtained low frequency. Okay, one, if your objective is to produce a certain frequency vibration, building entire pyramids is the last thing that you would do. This is the least efficient method you could go about that. If you want a room that vibrates, then make it big enough for you to go inside and then set it next to the river with a wheel turning in the water and gear it down till you hit the specific vibration. Next, at the top of the paragraph, he says, when the water reached the queen's chamber where the height of the water could not exceed the height of the shaft from the floor. Okay, the queen's chamber is right here, lower than the king's chamber. 2 paragraphs ago, he said, having the king's chamber, in fact, hermetically sealed would have caused excess water to rise up the north shaft. The queen's chamber would also be filled with water. But now he's saying when the water reached the queen's chamber where the height of the water could not exceed the height of the shafts from the floor, a particular frequency could be developed. Releasing into the air, it's filled with water 2 paragraphs ago, but releasing into the air a sound frequency that was able to interact with a cylindrical container placed on the floor of the room, traces of which are still visible. So which is it? Is it full of water or is it full of air? Because if it's full of water, then that cylindrical container, probably made of wood, would have floated off, but there's still marks on the floor of this. You guys see what I'm saying here? This is a bunch of mumbo jumbo. So now 2 individuals were placed both in the basin of the king's chamber and the cylindrical container in the queen's chamber and appropriately treated with this low sound frequency for curative and religious purposes. So it's the pyramid is a harmonic frequency healing device theory, and the 2 individuals would have to be placed in there before you started flooding all of the chambers, so they'd have to wait for a couple days for everything to fill up with water. Plus, water seeks its own level. So if you're going to flood any of these chambers, the water on the outside has to be at the same level. Maybe that's why you got boats to pour it down a shaft. But then what? Once it's full of water, it's not going to sit there and vibrate. It's just going to be sitting there full of water. I mean, I can understand if you have running water causing a vibration, but if you're just filling it up with water, it's going to vibrate as much as your swimming pool does, which is none. But now, once again, he's saying that the king's chamber was full of water. So I guess the two people in the king and queen's chamber drowned, because at the end of the procedure, the king's chamber was emptied by letting the water out of the great gallery and conveying it toward the room called the grotto, toward the unfinished chamber, which brought the water back through a path in the floor. Now occulted by debris, to the Nile. Subsequently, the queen's chamber was emptied, so that was full of water too. So the wood basin that was on the floor, that was just floating around the whole time, but it still left a mark on the floor there. But the queen's chamber was emptied in two steps. First, a granite plug, which is totally water sealed, in the corridor leading to the room was removed. This passage was previously unknown, so I guess he figured this out from the scans that they took, all of which were connected. We have also discovered and measured that the pyramids of the Giza Plateau present on all faces spatial indentations that tend to divide them in two with respect to the axis of central symmetry constituted by their vertices. That's saying absolutely nothing. But let's get down to the punchline. The numerous structures thus seem to belong to a giant resonator with the Z that, in our personal opinion, could function as a high order, probably fifth order, low pass acoustic filter due to its multi-layer and hence multi-stage characteristic. Well, I would have just used a flux capacitor to ambulate the Deuteronomy of the astral plane here, you know? I mean, that's totally hermetically conjugal. Jeez. This is such BS, and now there's 1,000 videos out there on this. Those guys are laughing their ass off. At this point, it might not be at all wrong to assume that many of the structures inside the pyramid could have been purposely flooded several times a year and thus left with the liquid flowing inside. The excess water could then be expelled from the shafts, which then, thanks to all the distortions in the faces, those estimated from the external results, acted as conveyors so that the water could be transported by gravity to the ground in an orderly manner. So yeah, water flows downhill, and all of the rest of that with the different shapes, it doesn't matter. Water flows downhill. That's all he said. He then says, we're going to do this for all the megalithic sites, which is exactly what the internet wants to hear. But in conclusion, through these discoveries, we believe it is appropriate for the Egyptian authorities to begin a campaign of excavations and drilling in order to bring to light and give back to all humanity all the structures we estimated through the use of proposed methods. So look, I don't know if this imaging that they used is real or not, but I do know that the whole end of the paper, the last 15, 20 pages, was a ufologist author spitting a bunch of crap. None of that actually worked like he is saying. I mean, if you fill a swimming pool full of water or the Queen's chamber full of water, it's not going to vibrate. It's just going to sit there full of water. But the internet's already gone wild with this. People making connections, right? Of course, it goes from that to Nikola free energy. And okay, Tesla claimed that his machines needed to be enormous, housed in central plants and spewing out power at a megawatt rate. Yes, that's what any power production plant does, only we use wires to transmit. He was going to do it wirelessly, but then we're going to combine that with this image and see, guys, the pyramid is a Tesla generator. So if it turns out that these structures are actually down there, that will be pretty amazing, and I might have to revisit this subject, but I know what he said in the last 20 pages just kind of negated all credibility in my mind. So before we get all too hyped up about this, just take this with a pinch of salt until we get further notice. That's just what I think about all this, but what do I know? Now I'm going to have to go watch some more of other people's videos to see where they went with all this, because I can only imagine. So, hey, to everyone who chipped in and donated, a big, huge, heartfelt thank you. You guys came out in force and really made all the difference in the world here. I am still making a thank you card to post up on videos here, but guys, I don't know what to say. That was amazing. I appreciate it. I hope you guys actually made it this far through the video to hear me say thank you, but I will be saying it many more times because that was amazing, guys. I really do appreciate it. This is going to help me get through the next phase of the master plan here. Can't tell you guys what the master plan is. I don't want to jinx it, but thank you. But once again, I don't want to hear anybody say that they had to work overtime to send me a couple bucks. If it's like that, I don't want it. Believe me, I don't. It's okay. But, you know, anybody that's not going to miss a couple bucks here and there, it is greatly appreciated. It really adds up on my end, and that's amazing. So thank you guys. I'll catch you on the next one. Static out.